Okay, welcome everybody. This is the second meeting where we are going over the bylaws draft. Last week we got through a decent chunk of it, but we ended up stopping short because there was not enough people. So glad to see that there is more people this week. The plan for this one is to just go over general notes. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to read it. There are comments on the side. We'll address some of those. So getting started, has everyone, are there any overall notes just on the whole thing? Just, you read it, you don't like it, something's seriously wrong with it, everything's looking good. Any general comments?
I had, I think, 3 comments.
Go ahead.
2 of them I put in as motions, but they're mostly minor. The third, I assume, was just something that hadn't been completed yet, which was actually specking out the Arbiter process.
Yeah, I think the motion that was passed was to just put in the Arbiter as is and not change anything. But I've not put in the Arbiter in this draft yet. I wanted to see how people were feeling about the draft before I threw in the page and a half of Arbiter rules and regulations. But it will be going in this evening.
Other than those 2 other motions, which are minor in comparison, nothing else from me.
Yeah, go ahead.
My computer finishes booting up. Yeah, so I had 2. One was as actually a motion for a slightly new functionality. I put it up, check August 13th at 5:13. All directors are responsible for maintaining a runbook, spelling out how they're implementing their responsibilities. This runbook is be updated at least twice a year. My thinking on this actually comes from something that Erica suggested early on, which was to make a process in place to make it easier for us to transition whenever we do transition, and just to make it easier for people to do their jobs. And by specifying in the bylaws that they need to at least keep this stuff spelled out and in paper somewhere.
I'm sorry, did you say you had that in writing somewhere? I'm not seeing.
I made the motion August 13th in the committee meeting chat channel.
See it now. Okay. Yeah, any thoughts on this motion? Anyone seconding this?
I'm looking for it right now. Hold on.
Yeah. Or I can repost it in the community meetings chat.
There we go. Obviously, we need some wording difference when it actually goes into the bylaws, but that was my idea.
So raise his hand. Yes, I.
Hi, yeah, I like the idea of it. One of the concepts in here says that the runbook is to be updated at least twice a year. That should only be for valuable update. That's not to say that there will be a valuable update twice a year. This runbook should at least need to be reviewed for update a minimum of twice a year.
I like your wording.
Otherwise, I wholeheartedly concur that every position should have a run book. I'm sure we can find a better name for it, but yeah, run book to cover the day-to-day activities and requirements of each. I mean, it's what I expect of all my employees. I figure we should probably do the same thing here.
Okay, so we have that seconded. We'll just wait for the wording to be updated, and then we'll put it to a vote. Oh, I can't actually write in the committee motions and votes. Someone can
I'm
handle that.
working on it. I'm
Thank
working
you.
on it.
There it is. It's in the committee motions and votes channel.
I think I got that wording right.
Yeah, that looks good. I think we are just waiting on Cy to actually vote. Cool. That looks like that passes unanimously. I will add that to the draft later this evening. As an aside, I also think I will actually make the foundation of that run book what is currently sections 2 through 9 or whatever in the draft. Yeah, 2 through 9 in the draft, and I'll just rewrite those sections with a more general overview of what the roles are supposed to be doing, like the current bylaws.
Point of order.
Yes.
Just really quick. Jeffrey, just wanted to make sure that you had a chance if you wanted to vote on this one. Thank you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I think I missed it a little bit.
I
Oh,
was just looking at the votes in the committee motions and votes, and I don't see your vote for the last motion posted.
Oh, apologies. I'm gonna take a look at that.
okay, perfect. So that motion passes unanimously. Any final comments before we move on to Stone's second motion?
Yeah, both Stone and I had hands up in the other channel.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Cy.
Okay, so it just occurred to me. The way this is worded, it appears that the run book is a singular run book, not individual run books per group. Was that the intent? That each member of the directorate would have their own section of a overall run book, or is it that each director from the directorate would have individual run books that would have to be maintained separately, but in a repository?
I mean, I'm not sure the actual effect is going to be different. It should be one set of files, whether the files are each authored individually or it's one file that's authored multiple people.
Right, because depending on how it's implemented in most places, each staff section has their own individual run book for the the actioning of their space. Whereas under the major group, they're all combined and put into one overarching book that handles, like, whenever you hand it to a new administration, it has all of the parts to it.
I mean, I'm not opposed to either way. I honestly got this from what Ericos posted originally. I'm not sure what he originally wanted. I'm also not sure what is better, so I'm all for suggestions.
So Militia just popped in here. Mook said we could it could be both, and I think that would probably be it. Like if we have maintained a repository where everyone has their own portions of it, and each one is updated, I think that would make more sense. But that's just me.
Yeah, and each department is going to have some degree of sensitive information that they're going to have to handle. Passwords, account details, all that.
Can you repeat that last bit?
I was saying the departments are going to have sensitive information that they're going to also have to distribute to their departments. You know, passwords, account numbers, stuff like that. So there will be some degree of sub books for each department at any rate.
Yeah, we are going to have to keep an eye on business secrets such as passwords versus what should actually be fully available to the entire community.
Most run books are not available to the entire community. It's strictly held within the management group. This is not something that all of Dagger would ever see. This is documents that, because of the nature of them, because of the sensitivity of the passwords and locations of files and whatnot, that has to be maintained within the directorate, and that's it.
So adding a statement, this is a private document maintained by the directorate, or do we not need to add that?
It should be a confidential collection, yes.
I don't think this is something that the committee necessarily needs to hammer out. It'll be an administrative thing that does need to be addressed, though. Like, we don't need to pass a bylaw on lock your passwords in a safe space.
You would be surprised if you didn't. Yeah, this is something that should be addressed as being confidential to the directorate and not shared with the chapter council, because otherwise you're going to have chapter council people who are to come in and try to demand to access it. No, this is not something that they should have. Everyone wants to have full transparency, but this is one of the very few things that should not be transparent.
So, Runbook to be considered confidential to Directorate and Chapter Council head, or no?
I would say strike the chapter council head. We have a motion that the run book is to be considered confidential for the directorate. Do we have a second for that motion? Okay, that is seconded. Can we get that into the vote, please? It's up.
Looks like we just need Jeffrey to vote on this one.
Jeffrey, Ty, and Stone.
I voted already.
Yeah, Stone
Oh, you
voted,
did.
Ty
I
voted.
didn't notice the yay right underneath. My bad. Okay. That is 6 votes yay, 1 vote nay. The motion passes. Stone, you had a second motion?
Yeah, but Sai, but did you have anything else since you voted before me?
Negative. This is it. Thank you very much.
Second might be because I missed last week's meeting. Has to do with the election process. I was a little confused with the reading of how you have things spelled out in the draft, with the section 10 being the board of directors election, and then section 15. 15.5 for the chapter council head election. No, 15 somewhere. I figured that I was thinking that it might be better to effectively combine those elections just for ease of management. I also figured that I also really liked how you set up the election board, I say.
Yeah, with the chapter council selecting a administrator.
Yeah, chapter council selects 3 people to be administrator to just run the election.
Ludus said, just want to convey the idea that while rundowns are confidential to a directorate, all other official business should be recorded and scrutinizable. And then Sai said, I cannot disagree with this unless we were to unless we were to stagger the election windows. Referring to the run book for the first from Ludus point, and then the election for size.
Sai, could you clarify?
Yes. Okay. Initially, my first statement was because I replied like a mere moment after Luda posted. That was my statement. The first post was about yours. The chapter head should be elected at the same time as the directors with the same term timeline for simplicity's sake. The only concern that I would have there is that whenever you have an entire administration change at the same time, it confuses processes. So usually what happens is you end up having a lesser turnout for your vote process because there's too many names going on and people aren't able to keep up with what's happening. So instead, what a lot of places do is they will have their directorate elections, and then that's for the general body, and then for things like we're talking about for the chapter heads, we would put those at 6 months later. So if we're doing it once a year, then we would stagger it every 6 months. If we're doing it once every 2 years, then we would do A year, B year, A year, B year. So that was that statement. The second one that I made was specifically in response to the concept of confidentiality for the run books, but all of the business being recorded and scrutinizable. That absolutely needs to be a thing. The directorate, the run books need to contain sensitive information, things like the maintenance of passwords, access requirements, safe, like your security questions, things like that per area, because that will need to be handed over to the next team, who will then update it with their own whenever they take over. That way, that the previous group wouldn't have that access to the same information. So yeah, anything beyond that, anything that's dealing with their actual business needs to be public.
If the goal is to have the election be 6 months off, I think we need to change the timing line one way or another.
Sure. No, I was just raising it as a possibility. I mean, if you guys want to run it concurrently, that's fine. It's possible. It's certainly nothing to stop it. It was just the concept being that if you're trying to run them, you're going to have a immediate change in continuity, where the team that you had in place before won't really have a whole lot to say. They can be like, peace out, I'm done. And new team has got to come in here and figure out what's going on. There's no real transition window.
Serially will have a comment. Oh, you still typing, Serially? Okay, so do we have a second for this current motion?
I'm withdrawing my initial motion, and I'm agreeing with the 6 month.
Okay. Moving forward, any other? Oh, lovely. It looks. Oh, there we go. I'm back. My internet cut out.
I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue with election fatigue, seeing as it's just the chapter council head who really the only job is to run the meetings and act as the intentional go-between.
Tiberius has a hand.
So by my understanding, the chapter council head is elected by the chapter council, not like the president who's elected by popular vote, which I might be mistaken on. So is there value in having it offset by 6 months if it's just going to be related? If it's just going to be an internal election by, how do I phrase this better?
No, you are correct. You there, Ty? Am I here?
Yes, you're here.
Okay. You are correct. The chapter council head is going to be elected by the chapter council itself and not by popular vote among the player base.
Right. And so that's going to be an internal election, basically an assignment of one of the chapter heads, one of the chapter representatives to be the chapter head. They're already going to be part of that same chapter council. Like offsetting that by 6 months, I don't see the.
Hey, look at that. My internet did cut out again. Hold on. Let me review motions. Yes, the executive board is to be elected by the chapter council. So it would be up to the chapter council to vote twice a year if we were to offset the chapter council head and the board of directors. Yeah, yes, Luda, I agree. I'm making a note of that right now.
Oh, I just
Oh,
live
you
added
got it.
that note to the
Yes.
draft.
Thank you. That was an oversight on my end. That will be addressed in the next revision of the draft. Okay, so do we want to? What's the current motion on the table? Is it still to do it offsetting or at the same time?
The last that I saw was that people were moving towards offsetting. However, there were some points against offsetting,
Yeah.
basically saying that the chapter council head does not play a large enough role with the board that there should be confusion, I believe.
Yeah. So does anyone want to put forward a motion that the vote should be offset, or do we want to keep it at the same? Do it at the same time.
Writing up some possible motions now.
Okay, Stone. His motion is chapter council head to be elected for a 1-year term, with the election occurring at the first chapter council meeting of the new year. Does anyone second that motion? And Sai says, I do not support the necessity of offsetting the following Tiberius' statement. However, I am open to benefits of the offset. As it stands in the draft right now, the chapter council head is to be elected starting July 1st, with an election happening between April and May. Stone has a counter motion, chapter council head to be elected by the chapter council meeting where the director election starts. First 1-year term starting August 1st. Do I have a second for that motion?
Yeah, I figure that's the two options. We should probably put them just both on the table and let us vote unless someone has. I probably need better wording, but yeah, unless someone has another idea. Yes, I mean, but concurrent with BOD elections.
Taveri says another situation is if the chapter council head is replaced via a chapter election, do we have to replace the chapter council head, or does the new rep fill the position until the new election? That is a very good point, Tiberius. Sai has a hand.
All right, this is going to be an unpopular pitch, and I'm happy to get it shot down, but I'd like to hear some arguments as to why not. Okay, so what we have is a problem with all of our chapters electing their personnel at whatever period they choose to elect. Whenever they do so, it's just going to stagger things out. They're going to have swaps of their chapter council leadership constantly throughout the year. And now we run into this problem with the chapter council head do we need to swap them out whenever that comes in, or do they have to have another election at whenever that occurs? Because we're not defining when chapters have to be able to have to perform their elections, we're not able to establish anything regarding the chapter council head other than a generality of whenever the chapter council head is replaced in their local chapter leadership space. that's whenever the new election would need to occur. We should really think about trying to standardize the election periods for chapters. I understand that it's not a great thing; it doesn't feel good, but by having this myriad of election periods going on out there, it makes it difficult for the national group. It's a problem. We need to make sure that yes, the chapters are running themselves. We just say that, hey, manage your elections during the first or second month of the year, or just give them a month window to do it. That way, everything can be updated after that. I mean, most small organizations, most large organizations, heck, even things like the Elks Lodge, requires their local groups, their regional groups, to have their elections all during the same month of the year.
Have you ever set a hand?
Oh, and hello, I'm visible. Okay. In my eyes, one of the major benefits of Dagger here versus the other LARPs out there is overall the small government. Like, you're allowed to run the park how you want, you're allowed to run your elections how you want, and your officers and whatever else you want. You have the opportunity and the power to do so. So I think it's much easier to err on the side of maintaining that autonomy versus trying to put into effect. Which, while I agree it's not a major change to say, hey, you have to have your elections in, say, every January. Another, I guess, side view of that is, and I haven't been to too many rags, but I assume that a new administrator of whenever they meet in the barn is the administrator is met during those meetings. Like, basically they said, hey, so-and-so is running it, or maybe it's the president. I don't know. I've only been to a couple of them. But if the chapter council head is mostly there to facilitate it, they could be, this might be changing it too often, but basically we start a meeting, we say, this is our first meeting, I guess. Tiverus is the chapter council head. He runs this meeting, he sets up the next one, and then at the next one, I guess they elect a new one, but that might be too many changes. But I do think we're going to run into a very hard wall trying to dictate how or even when chapters can run their elections. I guess that was my main point.
Okay, we have Luda and then Jeffrey. Luda, go ahead.
Yeah, so always we're trying to reach the balance point between a lot of detail and enough detail. And this might be one of those points where we're trying to go into too much detail. And the reason why I'm thinking that is because we don't specify that the chapter administrator or the chapter president or whatever has to be one of the two representatives on the chapter council. So in other words, right now we have a fluidity that if a chapter wants to send Joe Schmo from their chapter to represent them at the chapter council, that's fine with us. So it may not possibly be as big a deal to, worry about when individual chapters hold their elections, because they may not elect their representative to the council. It just may be, somebody that they have standing. We don't know that detail. So that's my point. The people who represent chapters at the chapter council aren't necessarily going to be elected, and that's not something that I don't think we have to control. Over.
Excellent point. Jeffrey, you had a hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it's a better thing for us to let chapters run themselves. Each chapter knows best how to run their own system. As far as I understand, the chapter council head, their only job is to chair the chapter council meetings anyway, so it's not really a strong position of power that has a lot of responsibilities. So I think it's fine to have a standardized time where the chapter council head is elected. And if that means that chapters that have varying election times might not always get a say in each time and who is the chapter council head, that's totally fine by me. You can leave it up to the chapters to change their bylaws to synchronize their elections with the timing of the chapter council head election. And if the chapter doesn't care enough, then let them have their elections whenever they want. You know what I mean? So I think to me it's more important that the chapters can just run themselves. I think if they want to have a specific say in the chapter head election, then they'll change their own bylaws to match that.
Thank you. I see two issues that should be addressed. The first being when the election for the chapter council head and how that is handled, the time frame for that election, how that's handled, and then the second, should the chapter council head be required to be a member of the chapter council, or can that be, oh, this person's no longer on the chapter council, they got elected out, but they can still fulfill their term as chapter council head?
It's not like we're giving them an extra vote or anything.
Yes, they should absolutely be a member of the chapter council, though. Tiberius, you have a hand.
Oh, I think the easiest function for now, and just to get this transition to the chapter council, would be that if they are replaced, you just have it. I say emergency, but it necessarily wouldn't be classified as an emergency, but basically a quick changeover. Oh, Tiberius was replaced by Joe, and he is no longer the chapter rep for Brutal Souls, or the chapter rep proxy in this case for Brutal Souls. We're gonna just have a quick replacement election for the new chapter head, because this in essence shouldn't be a very long process. It shouldn't need to necessarily be a a difficult election. It should just be a quick, hey, we need somebody to administer these elections for the next year or until they're replaced locally. Let's just run that quickly since everybody should already be there and present. Or a vice would actually be another good point. Just have a vice one just in case there's opportunity where they're not present or not available.
Dragon has a hand. Did I pronounce your name right? I cannot hear you.
Is that better?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was Dragon. Sorry, you're fine though. So it might have been said. I'm sorry, I had kids running behind me while this whole conversation was going on, but I would think that the chapter council head would be more of a national position, and so it should have its election time like standardized, whereas the reps, can fluctuate between the realms, and so it shouldn't have to do anything for the fact. Now, I do agree that to be elected chapter council head, you have to be a current rep, but I don't think that it needs to be as an individual level, since you're going to be running the chapter councils all across the nation kind of deal.
Thank you for that. Searly said, I think an impromptu election to replace the old chapter council head would be best. Mook said shadow chapter council head to spitball an idea as a point of order in a chapter council meeting, and Stone just said to be elected to be on the chapter council, you do not always need to be on the chapter council for the year. Sai said if the election is being held by chapter council members, it wouldn't be a difficult concept. those are all excellent points. So that would be the chapter council would have to hold a vote for a new chapter council head within 30 days of the vacancy if a member was to step down. Is that correct? Cyril says, generally the chapter council head is only important to the chapter council meetings. During the interim, with the new chapter council head is being elected, the directors can communicate with all the reps.
And
Yes, Stone.
I think we're getting a little bit too complicated with this chapter council head. I mean, the job is really just to run the meetings and to be the person who runs the meeting. That's about it. So it should be kind of like I'm thinking maybe it should just be an impromptu vote at the beginning of the year, and if someone no longer is able to do the position, then a new impromptu vote for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, Cyril has sort of a motion to table this, but then yeah, we can either table this idea for now, or we could vote on Stone's proposal. Okay, looks like people want to table this. Okay, cool. I will put that in the draft though as a comment that needs to be addressed. Yes. Thank you, Cyril. The hopefully everyone has access to the draft. If you don't, please DM me. I will give you a link, but we have been sending out emails, and the links in the bylaws draft writing group. It's the last post, or it's the latest post in that chat. And so we welcome you to comment on the draft. Discussions like this would be more than welcome. And Sai just posted it again in committee meeting chat. Thank you, Sai. Yeah, it is now 8 o'clock. Does anyone have to go? I'd like to go over just a real quick review of the executive board. Just if there's any general comments about any of the positions or anything as it's written now. Again, I'm going to go over and clean that up a bit, but I didn't want to touch. Yeah, just a rapid rundown. I'm thinking a lot of this stuff is actually going to go be the main corner foundation for the actual run book, because a lot of that's in there could actually just go straight into the run book. You don't need I don't think there needs a bylaw for the supporting staff or tactical officer under the executive director. So with that said, let's go into this. If you will look at the bylaws draft, section 3, executive director. Give people a moment to get there. Okay, so the executive director, this is more of a department just overview. With the purpose to organize, guide, and organizational guidance, infrastructure, and reporting, with a scope to be strategic planning, internal processes, including meetings, communications, and elections, maintenance of the bylaws and manual of arms, technological infrastructure, and internal organizational processes, representation, advocacy for all external organizations, and we'll work with public relations. Any comments on that? Any thoughts? And there's a bunch of listed officers that could possibly go into that department. Cool. Let's move on to section 4, Public Relations Department. The purpose is organizational, social representation, and public awareness, with the scope being strategy and administration of the DBGA social media, website, and publications, Dagger marketing, advertising, strategy, and materials, Dagger public community outreach and engagement, and equity and diversity in Dagger here. And we'll be working jointly with safety and security to define rules and disciplinaries, action procedures for social media. Any comments, concerns about the shape of the public relations department? Cool. Moving on, the Department of Records. The purpose to administration of Dagger chapters and membership, with the scope of registration and evaluation of Dagger chapters and Dagger memberships, DBGA records relating to Dagger chapters and Dagger membership, coordination of event scheduling between Dagger chapters, and will work jointly with other departments as necessary for the development of and delivery of materials to aid new Dagger chapters.
Question.
Yes.
Are they also responsible for ensuring that meetings, minutes, and decisions get recorded and publicly sent out?
I think it'd be fair to give them the responsibility within the board of directors meetings, but does the chapter council want to handle their own note taking or give that responsibility, invite someone from the Department of Records to help with that?
And the person in the Department of Records will already have access to all the flows and websites and everything to make it sent out. So
I'm going to make that as a comment, and we'll just move on.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Luda agreed that records should have something to do with meeting minutes and recordings. And there is now a comment on the draft asking whether that should be just for concerning the board of directors meetings, or if the chapter council meetings should also be their responsibility as well. Okay, moving on to the finance department. The purpose is management of organization finances. The scope is maintenance, distribution, and reporting of organizational funds, management of documents as necessary for tax purposes, guidance of organization funding strategies, and ensuring the DBGA maintains its tax-exempt status. Comments, concerns about the finance department?
Mostly kind of a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it's necessary, but based on other bylaws I've read, having to be a little bit more specific with finances, especially lines like no funds are going to be repaid without receipts given, stuff like lines like that. I am not sure how much that is necessary. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I'm not a lawyer. Basic question is, do we need to go into more detail on this one from a legal perspective or not?
And
Yes.
I do agree with Stone. This one probably should be a little bit more dived into, just because if, in his instance, if funds won't be paid out with producing of receipts, that needs to be spelled out specifically in that section of the bylaw, because people will find loopholes to get money. I mean, we've had that in organizations that I've dealt with in the past. So I think the whole finance section just needs to be well defined.
I certainly agree with that. I'm just wondering aloud, do we need to define that in the bylaws, or should there be something that is similarly locked down to the bylaws, but more like Runbook? Like locked down Runbook. This is the procedure. You can't change it without like a bylaw level vote.
I volunteer to read through several other bylaws that I've seen and see if I can come up with some additional language to put here.
I'd absolutely appreciate that. But yes, there should be a distinction between the publicly available bylaws and procedures that are going to be very specific and would be put into a Runbook, but again, probably a little bit more locked down than what it seems to be the idea for the Runbook as it stands. But I will add a comment onto that. Yes.
Just a quick subset for that. We could possibly do something on the lines for like all of those different subsections of the bylaws that maybe have some type of wording. I don't know how to word it properly, but refer to Runbook for certain proceedings or certain procedures. And that may eliminate that whole thing from the bylaws that we would have to go into huge detail. Just a thought. That's all it was.
Yeah, noted. I'll consider how to work with that in the bylaws when I'm redoing the draft, but I agree because there's going to be things that we need to reference that are going to be outside the scope of what a bylaws, publicly available bylaws should be. Moving forward to safety and security, the purpose, security and well-being of participants of Dagger Hero activities, the scope, participant health, safety, and security at Dagger Hero events, receipt and evaluation of complaints issued against individuals which have or may in the future participate in Dagger Hero activities and associated social media, disciplinary and preventative measures to ensure the security and well-being of participants of Dagger Hero activities and associated social media.
In other words, Arbiter.
Yes, and I will replace a lot of this section with Arbiter.
Actually, question
Yes.
to the group. Actually, do we want to use Safety and Security Department as the title, or do we want to use Arbiter as title? I actually kind of like Safety and Security myself.
Would it be worth just putting Arbiter in parentheses next to it so that we know what we're talking about? Or so that others know what we're talking about?
Tiberius says that he's apprehensive to. So my mic muted. Tiberius said I'm apprehensive to the change of the title since the Arbiter position is already well established and known. But Cyrilli pointed out that we are changing the names of President, Vice President to Executive Director, PR Director, etc., etc.
Sorry, I meant more that the writing in the bylaws was section 3 says executive director, whereas in 4 it just says PR department, as opposed to director of PR, etc.
Yes, these sections are more for the whole department and not specifically the responsibilities of the individual director. Who it was Brogar that wrote all this. So I didn't want to change what Brogar wrote until you guys had a proper look at it. And I do appreciate that he focused on the departments for these instead of just the individual director positions. So I see in the next revision of this draft, all of these are going to go away and sort of become the foundation for the run books. And then I'm going to replace these sections with the director specifically and their responsibilities.
Agreed.
Let's move forward to, we'll table the change of the Arbiter title. I will make a comment for it. Okay. Moving forward, the Department of Operations. The purpose, the quality, and standards for Dagger events. The scope being guidance for the planning and administration of Dagger events. Compliance of equipment with Dagger Manual of Arms, including but not limited to construction guidances and equipment checking standards. Guidance for battle game activities, including but not limited to scenario planning and heralding standards. Training materials for participant combat development and combat safety, with a joint scope working with safety and security and potentially arts and sciences. And I will get to that in a second. Any thoughts on Department of Operations?
Question.
Yes.
Just so we're on the same page, the Department of Operations really just come up with ideas and make sure and content and get it posted. And kind of direct people and here's good ideas. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that is my interpretation of how the Department of Operations was worded. Kind of an oversight committee for the entire game. Or oversight department. Luda had a hand.
Yeah, so this may be too much for people to tackle at this point, but when I look at operations and I look at battles and I look at arts and sciences, I sort of thought that we were going towards having sort of like an event coordinator, and underneath events could be battles, or it could be arts and sciences, or something like that, or it could be Department of Operations, and under that could be battles, under that could be arts and sciences. Just a thought to put out there. That sort of earlier on, I thought that that's kind of where we're heading, but maybe that grew out of favor. Over.
Yeah. Oop, go ahead, Stone.
Sorry, no comment.
Okay. That was going to lead in my next point. I haven't spoken with Brogar directly, but the Arts and Sciences department was crossed out. We'll go over it. I kept it in so people could look at what Brogar had written. I don't know if we had determined, it doesn't look like we had determined what we were going to do with Arts and Sciences. So going into that, Section 9, again, it's struck out for now, but if you guys want it in, we can definitely have it. The purpose of Arts and Science Department: roleplay immersion, and entertainment at events, with the scope being construction and theme guidance for garb, accessories, and props, guidance for the administration of non-combat entertainment, non-combat competitions, performance arts, and children's activities at events, promotion and evaluation of aesthetic quality of equipment, garb, and camps, and research and guidance on historic methods and fantasy references.
Hand.
Yes, Stone.
I'm actually kind of wondering if we kind of need to take these two departments and kind of roll it into one, so operations and arts and sciences, and say that the department's job is to promote the operations of running an event of the game and to provide tools for running events. So not so much that they're in charge of defining everything, but they're in charge of coming up with things to help other people run their events, because we're a very diverse community. Each chapter kind of running itself, this person's kind of in charge of providing some help to make it easier for others to do their job at events.
Sirius Lay says, I agree, battle and arts and sciences fall under Department of Operations, either coming up with or coordinating and gathering of information for event stewards. Looks like we have comments from Luda. Luda says, early on, I think we came up with the conclusion that arts and science was important possibilities for events.
And
Yes, Stone.
yeah, I think my memory was that we all agreed that arts and sciences was important. We just didn't know if it was important enough that it needed its own entire department or if it should be combined. Pretty sure that was the sticking point, whether it was by itself or combined with something else. I would support giving the director of operations the final interpretation of the Dagger Here rules, though.
Yeah, does anyone have any thoughts on that proposal? I don't think we'll go into a vote. I want to wrap this meeting up, but if anyone has any quick thoughts on giving the final rules and interpretations for the Manual of Arms to the Department of Operations. Yeah, Luda, it seems that people are definitely in agreement that arts and sciences and Department of Operations should at least be combined.
Apologies, this is Sirley. Were you suggesting the final interpretation of the MOA goes to Department of Operations, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
That is what Stone suggested. I just wanted to see just a quick. Don't actually vote on it. I'll just draft it if people are liking that idea. Okay, cool. Dragon likes it. So I'll put that in the draft with a comment attached to it so people can note. I'm going to say it's now 8:22. Are there any final thoughts or comments before we wrap the meeting up?
Hand? Luna?
Yes.
I'm just quickly going back to the responsibility of the executive director related to what we just talked about. So it says that they are going to maintain, yes, right there, the DBGA bylaws and Directorate Manual of Arms. Just might need to put another joint scope as far as 3.3.2. It says right now that they shall work with public relations to provide. Oh no, I get that, to like update the website, but it might be another joint scope to enter into 3.3 to tie in the director of operations and the interpretation of the manual of arms or whatever. That makes sense. Sorry.
Yeah, the way I'm thinking is that keep the maintenance of the DBGA bylaws and give the Department of Operations maintenance of the Manual of Arms.
Yeah, I was just seeing if there was some kind of conflict with the responsibilities of the executive director. That's all. I don't think we really have a conflict, but just something to check.
And I think it makes sense for the Department of Operations to handle the Manual of Arms, because people going to the executive director for questions about how the game is supposed to be played doesn't make a lot of sense when they're not really doing anything to do with the game so much as the administration of the organization.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay. So we'll be closing out the meeting. We will be meeting again next Sunday, August 22nd. This will be for the final revision that this chapter council will be or this committee will be doing. And then we will be handing over the draft to Artari for their consideration. And it looks like early September, Artari will be in a position to have a vote on it. But that is sort of out of our control, so. Yeah,
Hey, Sil, this is Luda.
yes, Luda.
Yeah, so actually, yeah, we are moving towards sending this to Artari. I wonder what people think about our ability to get the various chapters as they exist now, given what kind of response that we've gotten. We've gotten some good participation in these meetings. Do we feel like that is a definite step? I mean, that was something in my mind to get the various chapter reps to vote on the draft. that this committee comes up with before handing it over to our Atari. That's my one concern. Over.
From a political perspective, it will imply that the game is behind these bylaw changes entirely.
I don't mind having a longer last meeting, especially if we can get good participation like we've had today. Definitely need to be able to wrap this up. And yes, I also agree with Cirle that if we had more people commenting during the week, that is also extremely helpful. Over. And I agree with Stone. The ability to present bylaws that have been voted on by chapter reps, as many as we can get to answer, would be politically, if not otherwise, very important, I think. Over.
And just one consideration, so that this is just what I've heard. Again, Atari is going to do what Atari does. We're not, as a committee, we don't have direct control over Atari and their scheduling. But I heard that September 4th was going to be a very good day for Atari to actually get together and vote on anything that we had come up with. So
Yeah, so yeah, as far as the Aratari timeline, when I spoke with the current board, they raised the point that we're having our next battle on September 4th, which is when we normally would have meetings. So if we could get the bylaws to them, say, a week in advance to give them time to look over the bylaws. They may still come back if they have anything that they're concerned about and ask to push back the voting from the 4th. But if we can get the bylaws to them a week before the 4th, that would be a very helpful thing as far as the overall timeline. And then if they have to push it back because they need to discuss something for some reason, then that is on their timeline as far as not us missing our timeline. It becomes their timeline at that point. So just some thoughts for consideration. Over.
And
yes, Stone.
just talking about how Aratari AWC meetings normally handle, and based on what I've heard as well, is that they really want to see it by as soon as possible. But then they will have a second meeting where it will be voted on. So there might be suggestions that come out of the first meeting that people in this group might want to actually hear and look at and maybe change, but that it will be a two meeting event for the AWC to make the actual changes. And that's just following with AWC tradition. Should also note we have multiple AWC members who are fully behind this entire process and will ensure that this does continue to get pushed on.
So with that said, we definitely do need a longer meeting to go over the full draft. But do we as a committee want to try and push for hitting that September 4th potential deadline, or do we think we need a little bit more time to go through and wrangle, get all the chapters to ratify whatever draft, to have that meeting to go over the full draft as a committee? Dragon says we should push for the September 4th goal. Thank you for attending, Jeffrey. Luke says, as long as we hammer home that passing the draft would like to have a full vote on the draft, I think that we should shoot that shot. Okay. So I have two proposals. One, that we actually do try and meet on a Saturday and split this up, because this is going to be a long meeting going over the full draft line by line, and really, like, we could get tied up on some stuff. Do we want to split it over 2 days, over one weekend, or have a very long meeting on one day? Preferably Sunday. Thank you for coming, Sai. Stone suggests that we send out a draft of all the chapter or to all the chapters on a Google form, with one question on the form being, do the chapter reading agrees with the bylaws that and would like to see them implemented. Yeah, I also have a concern on Saturday. I was planning on going out to a run fair, so I wasn't sure when I was going to be returning home. I could probably do the meeting over my phone, though.
I'm available to do the recording Saturday and Sunday, but I think I prefer a long meeting Sunday myself.
Actually, hold on. Let's just do it this way. I'm gonna make two comments, and people can just upvote what they like. Okay, so it's looking like it's going to favor one long meeting, 8:22 on that Sunday. Yeah, do we want to start earlier or just have it go as long as it needs, starting at 7?
I know that I voted for earlier, but probably better to not go earlier, just given what we've heard of people's availabilities on Sundays in general.
I mean, that is true. A lot of people are coming back from practice.
Yeah, especially some people who aren't in the East Coast time zone.
Let's give this a little bit more time. As far as the exact starting time, let people that had to sign off also take a look at this. But maybe 6 p.m. if people are voting for earlier, or even 6:30. No, I'm not seeing any movement with the voting, so we'll figure out a time and we'll get back to you guys. You will be notified. Thank you all for coming. This is a very productive meeting.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
And now I'm gonna have to go back to work tomorrow. Boo.
Oh, I am killing the recording.